Hello, Uta here with a sunflower seedling, which I will plant out, that and maybe a dozen more. If you plant sunflowers, when they form the heads and have the seeds, you will get goldfinches. We have a pair of goldfinches that has come back now for the second year. That was last season, and it is just so delightful. Now, this is not delightful. But this development is just being reported. Probably it won't get reported on mainstream media, but it's first on the Daily Signal. This just came through today. 15 Republicans in the U.S. House and Senate sent a letter to the National Institutes of Health Tuesday, demanding answers about a study on experimental medical interventions for youth who claim to identify as transgender. Two of the study participants committed suicide. It was a little more than 300 subjects spread across three or four different clinics. And 11 experienced suicidal ideation. Now, this is after they've been affirmed, while they're getting treated. And the drugs participants took will likely sterilize them, the Republicans noted. It is sickening that the federal government is preying on young people and using our taxpayer dollars to advance its radical gender ideology. Representative Josh Brachin of Oklahoma told the Daily Signal in a statement on the letter, exclusively provided to the Daily Signal. We are rightfully demanding answers from NIH, and we are committed to holding those responsible accountable for this tragic loss of life. So the possibility that there might be suicidal ideation or completed suicide in the cohort of actually a rather small study, just 315 subjects, and we don't know if some of the subjects who left were counted in that 315. There's a lot of really sketchy stuff going on. So the thing is, there needs to be training and everything about dealing with suicidal ideation. And I think that for females anyway, for the natal female body, testosterone is a very dangerous drug. And what I've understood from the detransitioners is that they become more suicidal. The National Institutes of Health granted $477,444 in a 5-year grant to the Boston Children's Hospital, the University of California at San Francisco, and the Lurie Children's Hospital of Chicago for the study titled Psychosocial Functioning in Transgender Youth After 2 Years of Hormones. Dr. Diane Chen at the Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago led the study, which the New England Journal of Medicine published in January. So now here we are. This got published in January, and it is now May. So that's kind of interesting that there wasn't more notice about this in January. The study analyzed 315 participants identified as transgender and non-binary. So if you say you're non-binary, I don't know why you need to take opposite sex hormones. They were between the ages of 12 and 20, and this was a 2-year study, which is actually not long for follow-up at all. These participants received gender-affirming hormones, meaning hormones to make their male or female bodies resemble bodies of the opposite sex. During the study period, appearance congruence, positive affect, and life satisfaction increased, the researchers claim, and depression and anxiety symptoms decreased. Chen's article on the study claims that 11 participants experienced suicidal ideation and 2 committed suicide. And it doesn't sound like there's much comment about that or much taking responsibility about that. In the letter, the Republicans express grave concerns about the study, noting that 240 of the 300 participants were minors. The Republicans cite a report from the medical organization Do No Harm, which found the study fatally flawed and borderline unscientific. Notably, the 4 clinics, okay, I've only got the names of 3, but anyway, and some of the researchers who conducted this experiment are outspoken advocates for gender transition interventions on children. In a video later removed from its YouTube channel, Boston Children's Hospital, one of the clinics involved, went as far as to claim that children can know their gender identity from the womb. Joanna Olson, I think it's Joanna Olson Kennedy, a co-author on this paper, told CNN in 2014, "We're definitely in the middle of a gender revolution, and it's exciting." This same researcher later received a federal grant for a study in which she altered the protocol to allow children as young as 8 years old to receive cross-sex hormones. The Republicans note that the 2 suicides and 11 episodes of okay, that's not a complete sentence, but okay, 2 suicides, 11 episodes of suicidal ideation. Rather than shutting the study down after such serious adverse events, the researchers published their paper, concluding that the study was a success because the cross-sex hormones had altered subjects' physical appearance, it's all surface, and improved psychosocial functioning. Okay, Uta's note. 2 years is not long enough because they have barely completed whatever path they are on for this study. However, the researchers admitted that they were not able to properly establish causality between the administration of cross-sex hormones and improved psychosocial functioning because their study lacked a control group. They always lack a control group. The only study with a control group is the Dana one from Sweden. That's 2011. They studied death records, so they could study the deceased Swedes who were non-transgender, and what Dana is spelled Dheine. Her first name is Cecilia. With those keywords, you can find it. However, those researchers hid the fact that they found that among deceased Swedish women, there was a 40 times higher rate of death by suicide in the females than in the females who had done the operations and gone through so-called transition. It's alarming that vulnerable young people died by suicide while participating in a taxpayer-funded study that will almost certainly inflict devastating physical harm on those who participated, the letter adds. 24 participants in this study received cross-sex hormones after puberty suppression or in early puberty, and are very likely sterile as a result. Further, participants are now at increased risk for cardiovascular disease, blood clotting, and a list of other complications. The Republicans also cite research showing that gender dysphoria in minors often resolves, this is, I think, from Blanchard, this goes back, often resolves as they progress through puberty, completely undermining the idea that children should have their bodies permanently altered to match their changing identities. Despite overwhelming evidence that chemically transitioning children is not safe, the NIH plans to give more than $10.6 million to experiment on children and adolescents through 2026. We are deeply concerned about your agency's use of taxpayer dollars to advance experiments on children who will be irreversibly harmed by radical gender ideology. The letter ends with a request for responses to 14 questions by a deadline of June 9th, 2023, in just a month. The Republicans ask how old the two individuals who died by suicide were, where they received the treatment, and when the researchers at that site alerted other researchers of those suicides. They ask the NIH to list the steps that were taken to halt and review the study after the first and second deaths. I mean, just think about this. They might have at least prevented the second death. And whether other participants were notified of the suicides. They also ask whether other participants and their parents were given the opportunity to withdraw from the study following the two suicides. Have study participants been evaluated to assess sterility or impaired fertility as a result of receiving cross-sex hormones? They ask. Will a follow-up occur to evaluate the long-term physiological state of the subjects? Right. And also long-term mental health. The letter notes that 6 participants withdrew from the study and asks for these participants' ages and their reasons for withdrawing. It also requests information on ongoing or proposed NIH funding for studies involving transgender or non-binary identified minors. Despite glaring shortfalls, this government-funded research is already being used to further the fallacy that chemically transitioning children is safe and effective. Okay, so this was quite a group of senators and Congress representatives. Taxpayer dollars should not be used to fund studies that encourage gender transition interventions on young people. The NIH must be held accountable for using taxpayer dollars to study these highly questionable experiments. And you can find this copied into my WordPress blog, utahagengrasswidow.wordpress.com. I will remind you to please like and share. This is going to be important because this is very, very similar to the research and observations that went on in Sweden, Norway, Finland, and the UK, as well as France, where it looks like things are changing, in terms of what are the results from all of these so-called gender treatments. Please do me a favor and go to my wellness movements playlist and let me know in the comments if the movements are too lengthy and if I should break them down into smaller pieces, because I honestly do believe that my focus on sort of the circle around our body, what I would call a circle of sanctity around our body, as in the Leonardo drawing of a man. And I try to really trace the outer edge of that circle that we can make with our limbs if we think of a sphere of sacredness, really, around our bodies. And I really want to see some suggestions for alternatives to this, the W path. I want to see deep and quality psychotherapy as well as mind-body work, similar to Feldenkrais's physical therapy or Alexander body work, because it's not just you need to get out and do a sport and not be on screen time. It's also that you need to figure out getting in touch with your body, and the two centers, the pelvis and the solar plexus, are really key to an awareness of one's mind-body connection. Thanks. I'm going to be planting those sunflowers.